The energy at this place is so dark, it might actually have anthropomorphized into an ancient elemental evil. It's time for a Dark Place deep dive. Now that we've covered some of the basics about energetically loaded places, I want to take a closer look at some specific sites that live rent free in my head. Delve a little deeper into the histories and legends that have contributed to their uniquely strange reputations. And because I'm a horror writer and general gothic ghosty girly, I'm sure it will come as a surprise to absolutely no one that most of my favorite places are those with distinctly dark histories. These are my muse places, and you'll find snippets and traces of them in all of my horror novels. First up is one of Ireland's most notorious residences, the medieval fortress turned paranormal enthusiast dream site, Leap Castle. Check out any most haunted places list, and I'm willing to bet Leap Castle appears near the top. And not just Ireland-specific lists. I'm talking global rankings. But while Leap is internationally famous for its ghost stories, you don't have to believe in the paranormal to appreciate how much blood has soaked into its stones over the centuries. Honestly, its history alone is more than enough to explain the lingering sense of unease visitors report. Leap Castle was built by the O'Bannons in the 13th century, with most scholars dating the original stone keep to around 1250. The O'Bannons were a prominent offshoot of the Fally, an ancient Irish dynasty that once ruled over much of what is now County Offaly. Not long after it was built, however, Leap Castle was taken by a far more powerful Irish family, the O'Carrolls of Ely. The O'Carrolls were ruthless warlords who controlled large swaths of land across Offaly, and were frequently at war with English settlers, rival Irish clans, and even themselves. The O'Carrolls were notoriously violent, and a lot of people died at Leap during their tenure. I'm telling you, if the walls could talk, well, they would probably scream. The O'Carrolls held Leap Castle as a strategic stronghold for nearly 300 years, during which the castle became a backdrop for numerous betrayals, assassinations, and executions. The most infamous of these is an episode that gave rise to the name the Bloody Chapel. Following the death of the O'Carroll chieftain in 1532, a fierce rivalry for leadership of the clan erupted amongst the family, which resulted in one of the O'Carroll sons murdering his own brother inside the chapel at Leap. But the crime was even worse than mere fratricide. The brother was a Catholic priest, and he was murdered in the middle of saying Mass, reportedly stabbed by his brother at the altar in front of the gathered family. His blood is said to have soaked into the floor and stained the chapel forever, both literally and spiritually. In 1642, the castle and its lands passed through marriage to the English Darby family. The Darbys were among the many English Protestant settlers who flooded into Ireland during the plantation period. The Darbys held the estate for the next 280 years, until the castle was partially burned down in 1922 during the Irish Civil War. It was during the Darbys' tenure that one of Leap's most horrifying secrets was rediscovered. At the beginning of the 20th century, a large-scale renovation project was undertaken to restore and update parts of the castle. During these renovations, workers stumbled upon a hidden oubliette behind a wall off the Bloody Chapel. Raise your hand if you know what an oubliette is. Looking at you, fellow Labyrinth fans. The word translates from French as a little place of forgetting. A quaint name for one of the most horrifying death traps ever conceived. Basically, an oubliette is a subterranean dungeon with only one point of access. And that point of access only goes one way. In, not out. Prisoners or unsuspecting victims would be pushed through a hole in the floor of some upper room and fall, often from a significant height, into the sealed, doorless chamber below. If you were lucky, you'd break your neck when you hit the ground, because otherwise you were in for an agonizingly slow death. Located in the northeastern corner of the Bloody Chapel, Leap's oubliette is accessed through a narrow hole that was originally fitted with a trap door. And I use the present tense because it's very much still there today. You can see it if you visit the castle. But back to the early 20th century. After the discovery, the Darbys immediately initiated excavations, and the oubliette soon began to reveal its horrors. Inside the chamber, excavators found spikes on the floor, designed to impale anyone thrown in. Which sounds horrific at first, but when you consider the slow death alternative, it might actually have been intended as a mercy. But get this. Over the course of the excavations, 3 cartloads of human remains were removed from the chamber. 3 cartloads! That discovery alone gives you a pretty good sense of how Leap Castle earned its reputation. But that wasn't the end of the horror. Turns out the rediscovery and excavation of the oubliette might have had unintended consequences. Some believe the disruption of all those remains unleashed something like an emotional shockwave through the castle, stirring previously dormant spirits or energies to life. Most notably, a creature known as the Elemental. This alleged entity gained notoriety largely because of Mildred Darby, who lived at Leap from the late 19th century to 1922. Born in 1867, Mildred Darby was a Gothic novelist with an intense interest in the occult. Noting the uptick in strange activity at Leap after the excavation of the oubliette, Mildred began to investigate, holding seances and making other attempts to commune with whatever was moving unseen through the castle halls. It was during the course of her inquiries that Mildred alleged to have confronted the elemental firsthand. She later wrote about her terrifying encounter, and the account is chilling. Quote, I turned round sharply and saw, as clearly as I see you now, a gray thing standing a couple feet from me. I cannot describe in words how utterly awful the thing was, its very undefinableness rendering the horrible shadow more gruesome. Human in shape, about the size of a sheep, thin, gaunt, and shadowy in parts. Its face was human, or to be more accurate, inhuman in its vileness, with large holes of blackness for eyes, which seemed half decomposed. Nose it had none, only spreading cancerous cavities, the whole face being a uniform tint of gray. My friends who are clever about occult things say it is what they call an elemental. Neither spirit nor flesh, neither dead nor alive, an elemental is described by occultists as a uniquely malevolent presence. Not a ghost, but something more ancient and unknowable. The collective weight of centuries worth of dark emotions, fear, sorrow, anger, despair, anthropomorphized into an entity that defies human comprehension. Traces of the elemental and other strange shades have been reported for the last century or more, even after the castle was partially burned, abandoned, and left to rot. Leap was rescued from the brink of oblivion in 1974, when the Australian historian and a maternal descendant of the O'Bannons, Peter Bartlett, purchased the estate and carried out extensive renovations. When Bartlett died in 1989, Leap was purchased by the Irish musician Sean Ryan, who still owns the place to this day. Actually, I myself had the privilege of seeing Leap in person a few years back. Though, as much as I would have loved to, I did not go inside. Even though I'd heard through the grapevine that Sean Ryan is very gracious about inviting curious visitors in for a look, I still felt like I would be intruding. So I just stood outside and gawked like a weirdo. But then, totally randomly, my partner and I happened to meet Sean at a pub in Galway. Of course, I started gushing about my obsession with Leap, and he said we should have popped in. So, definitely next time. Sean Ryan and his family have put considerable effort into placating and quieting the spirits at Leap over the last 30 years. But the legends live on. Ghost hunters, historians, and curious thrill seekers alike continue to speculate about the dark energy lingering at Leap. And after everything it's witnessed, I'd say it has every reason to be haunted. So, what do you think? Just a colorful legend? Or the architectural equivalent of a psychic wound?